Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, lovely listeners. I hope you're doing well. I'm good, thanks for wondering. I've been extra busy this week due to the Me Made May challenge drawing near. In fact, it will have started when this episode goes out. Lots of people have been tagging me into their posts with their pledges. I've also come up with my own pledge this year, which is kind of an amped up version of what I've been doing previous years. But I think I'll talk about that more next week. I'm very happy to report, however, that the Me Made May mini-series of Check Your Thread episodes seems to have had their intended effect. Lots of people are saying things along the lines of, I didn't realise what it was before. I thought it was just about taking photos and showing off your handmaids. So there's lots of people who are now pledging to take part now they know what it's really about. So that's awesome because I genuinely believe it can help us all with creating more mindfully and more sustainably. So how's your making been going? So I've been working on a semi-panic project, making my daughter a jumpsuit for the birthday party she's going to tomorrow. I had the idea to make this project anyway for the summer, then I realised it would work well for the theme of the birthday, so I've pushed it to the top of my to-make list. I'm using this slightly metallic looking jersey that I scored at the recent fabric swap, and I'm using the Victoria dress and jumpsuit pattern by Threads by Caroline. And whilst I have my overlocker threaded up in black, I'm also making her and myself some undies from the leftovers of that jersey, and a desperately needed pair of undies for my husband, which I've cut out from an old sleeping t-shirt of mine that I no longer wear. To keep my head in the sustainability game this week, I've been listening to a couple of great podcast episodes that I'd like to recommend. First up, you must make sure that you listen to episode 123 of Stitch Please, the podcast from the Black Women Stitch movement. It features another wonderful dose of wisdom provided by previous Check Your Thread guest, Shams Eldin Rogers. She was as awesome and enlightening as ever on Stitch Please, and I'm sure you'll enjoy her conversation with the host Lisa Woolfolk. Secondly, I'd very much like to recommend the latest episode of the Sustainable-ish podcast, which is number 138, entitled How Much Difference Can Individuals Actually Make? Jen speaks to Tom Bailey from an endeavour called Take the Jump, and he outlines 6 clear ways that everyone can make changes, which research has shown will have a significant impact towards limiting the rise of global temperatures. It really was a very heartening listen, finding out which things we can all work towards straight away in our own lives that have been proven to have a more positive impact. And whilst we're on the topic of stuff we can actually do, UK listeners, have you signed up to the Big Plastic Count yet that I mentioned in last week's intro? Head over to thebigplasticcount.com to find out more and to sign up to this very important endeavour. You'll be committing to counting your plastic packaging for just 1 week during May, and everyone's audit put together will give Greenpeace and Everyday Plastic the info that they need to push the UK government and supermarkets to tackle the massive issue of plastic pollution. And speaking of podcasts, massive thanks to listener Anita for signing up to support this one over on Patreon. Without Patreons giving monthly support, there's literally no way I could make this podcast. Honestly, making a podcast is a super time-consuming and costly endeavour. Anyway, if you can help, please think about it. To find out more details, follow the link in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. So on to today's episode. It's the second episode with mending expert Erin Lewis-Fitzgerald. Last week, we heard her fascinating story from when she started out as a young journalist right up until she wrote her epic book, Modern Mending. This week, we dig into the book itself, including more information on one of my very favourite features, Anxious Frog. Plus, we explore the important and very freeing concept of Experimend. Erin also drops dollops of wisdom for newbie menders and encourages us all to share our mends, no matter how unimpressive we feel they may be. I loved talking to Erin so much. I'm sure we'll hear from her again on Check Your Thread in the future. In the meantime, enjoy! Your book is so fun and it's just such an amazing resource. It's not just a mending book. There's so much creativity and joy in it, and you just make it so that every mend is like a celebration of that item, a celebration of like the whole concept of giving it new life. So you were doing the in-person workshops and you were doing the online workshops. So at what point did you think a book? Like, sounds like you were quite busy.
I'm never not busy. Thank you, first of all, for saying that about my book, because I feel like if you look at the cover, and it depends on where you get the book, because it has 2 different covers depending on where.
I've seen 2 different. Yeah. So that I've got this one, but when I first saw your book in the library, it was the one that had this jumper as the main. One. Yes, that one.
And it looks very serious, doesn't it? Like, it looks like it's serious business. And so if you open it and you read the wacky stuff, you're like, wait a minute. So so I love it when people actually have read it and they go, it's actually fun. I go, okay, that makes me happy that they get it. I've thought about writing a book a few times, and I did this project in, I think it was 2016. I did a project with Jen Gale in the UK. She's just very famous.
I know Jen Gale. I know. Yes.
I'm so excited to say I know her. But we did this project for like 6 months called The Daily Fix, where we were trying to encourage people to do repairs, and we were posting about them on Facebook. And we had talked about it then. We were like, oh, I should do a book. It was funny because I had assumed that other people would kind of do that instead. I was like, oh, surely there's, and I named a few people. I'm like, surely they're going to do a book, but then they hadn't. And I kept waiting and no one had done it. But at that time I was running Bright Sparks and I was so busy that there's no way I could have written a book. And the turning point came at the end of 2017. I remember I had spent most of a year trying to find a second location for Bright Sparks. And it's a long saga that I won't get into, but I remember getting this email when I was in the States for Christmas, and it just said, oh, you can't have that space anymore that we promised you. And we'll let you know if another one becomes available. And it just destroyed my soul. And I knew, again, this is one of those moments where I just felt it in my body. I just went, that's it. I'm done. I'm writing a book now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And within like 10 minutes, I knew it was called Modern Mending as well. I have no idea. I was just like, that's it. It wasn't like, oh, I quit like in rage. I just felt like that part of my life was complete now. And that chapter was done. And I could just go, that's it.
Satisfying.
Next one. And then in the process of pitching the book, then I found out all those people who I'm like, well, they haven't written a Mendy book, so someone has to do it. And then it turns out that they had been working on it, but for like years and years and years. But that's fine, because now there are a ton of mending books out now. They're all very different.
So good. Exactly. I think like the literal more the better, because every single person is going to be drawn to one particular thing more than others. The more there are, the more opportunities there are to catch someone's attention, to catch someone's eye, to teach them something. And everyone learns in different ways, don't they? And everyone is going to gravitate towards a different explanation or a different method or a different mentality or a different approach. And so literally the more the better, I feel, in terms of books about mending and sustainability more generally, I'd say, no?
Yes. And it also helps people find other mending books. Like if even one gets them excited, and then someone can say, oh, did you see this one? Or like I sell other people's mending books in my shop because I'm like, I think these are great. And I think they also add something that mine does not have. And it's nice to be able to, like, if I wrote everything I knew or thought was interesting, it would probably be like a 500-page mending.
Yeah, it's not even possible.
No, you just don't have the space. Like there's no publisher who's going to let me do that.
Amazing. So you were saying that the format is effectively the format that your classes took, the way you structured it.
Very much. In my course, we do stitching the first night, and then we do, I think it's patching, and then darning, and then needle felting. And in the in-person class, there was machine darning, but in the online version, I do not do that because I was so terrified of like, if I can't trust your confidence level in person, there's no way I'm going to supervise a bunch of people. So I'm like, it's in the book. And like by that time, the book was already out. So I could just say, it's in the book if you need to know it. But yeah, that's how I broke it down. And I think I'm a very big fan of craft books. And my personal preference is that I prefer books that aren't project-based. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that they're bad or good. That's just my own personal preference. And so I didn't want to say, here's how you mend this particular type of jumper or whatever. I wanted to go, these are the foundations that you need. And then you can put them together in all these different ways. Yeah. And if someone says to me, like, how do I mend this hole? Well, there's probably like 100 different ways that you could do it.
Sure.
So if you learn these things, then you can figure out how you want to actually mend the hole. And then it can come down to aesthetics. Like, what's your personal preference? How do you want something to look? How much time do you have? What can you be bothered
Exactly.
doing?
So it's like dropping little kind of like knowledge bombs, like little skill bombs, and then they can pick them up and apply them as they feel and also some people are going to prefer some approaches to others, aren't they? And also if you're aiming for something that's visible or invisible,
Yes, I just felt that I wanted people to be more well-rounded, and I wanted them to be able to problem solve. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what makes my book very different. Some people aren't looking for that. Some people are looking for pretty, or they're looking for inspirational essays, or all the other things that you might find. But in my case, it's like, do you want like a solid foundation? Like this is where you find
But there is a lot of there's so much inspiration for your book, and there's so much motivation as well. I love it as well. I found it really, really reassuring to read that you yourself find that you are sometimes stuck in a state of paralysis when you've got a garment in front of you that needs to be repaired. So I guess pretty much all of us who sew or knit or whatever, we have our own mending pile, and we fear that we may never see the bottom of it. So you've coined the term experiment, haven't you, which kind of offers some sort of relief from that kind of paralysis. So I'd love to dig into that as well.
Yes. I don't know if I'm the first person to say experiment, but it's kind of that other thing too, because sometimes there are, like, one of the things I love about teaching is meeting different people, and you see the different personality types. And I love seeing how people learn differently. And some people are very anxious when they learn, and they want to know every single bit, and they want a prescription. They want, like, tell me exactly how to do it. Whereas other people are just like, wait, let me go do my, like, they're the students who shoot ahead of you and they've missed like key steps because they're already doing their own thing, it takes all sorts. I love it. But
it's so interesting. And then there's people that have been like kind of staring at you all class, and they've been like looking really kind of, and you're thinking, I don't think these people are having a good time. I don't think they're into this. And at the end, they're like, that was amazing. I love them. You're like, really? I thought you wanted to go home and you hate me.
I have also had that experience. Yeah. But I think Experiment is about giving people the freedom to not have to stick to the rules or anything that, like, I know, because I don't necessarily know everything. And it's also for those students who, like, usually when I get to the end of my course, when people ask me questions, I start saying, what do you think? Class, what do you think this person should do? So it's about, and that's one of the reasons I also wanted to include the case studies in the book, because quite often I don't just use one technique. It's like, well, I did this because there was this weird rip over here, and then I chose this because the owner really needed it to be waterproof or whatever it is. I guess Experiment is like a kind way of saying it's okay to make stuff up.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to tell you off because you didn't do it exactly the right way. It's like, just have a go, and then report back, tell me, and then you can teach me something, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I think if I was running a business where we were doing invisible mending, like, let's say it was a reweaving business, or something to that effect, then yes, there probably is a right way to do it. And there are much better methods. And then it would be more of a stickler. We have so much more freedom now, and there's so many more things that you can do.
And we have so many different garments in our wardrobe, don't we? And different types of fiber, and they have different purposes for our multifaceted lives. So
Absolutely.
it's not like I only do sashiko because I have nothing but denim. Like, that's not reality, is it?
No, it's not. And with the old school mending books that I love, they don't have a lot of the clothes that we wear now. So they don't have like jersey cotton, and they don't have jeans, and they don't have like modern undergarments. I mean, they have like tips for mending pantyhose. And then who does that? Yeah. And I've noticed that people who sew but don't knit can be really confident with things made, with a sewing machine. But when it comes to darning, they have no idea.
Terrified.
Yeah. Or I've had students who are professional machine sewer and really not at all confident with hand sewing. And so it's fascinating. It's like, it depends on what you wear. It depends on what you know how to make. So you don't have to know how to make clothes in order to mend. And I guess that was the other thing that I tried to impart.
So it's no secret between us that one of my favorite parts of your book is a character that pops up from time to time called Anxious Frog.
I love Anxious Frog.
Who is Anxious Frog, and does he get royalties for making his appearances?
No, Anxious Frog is a slave. He worked for free. Anxious Frog is a little needle-felted frog that has a little frowny face.
It's so sad.
He is so sad. I was making a sampler of all the different like fun shapes you could make with needle felting, just to give students ideas. And then I made this little shape, and the frown was there before I even embroidered it. There was kind of naturally like a little dented part. And I thought, I'm going to make that stand out and make him frown. And I remember my mom seeing it and going, why can't you make him smile? Like he looks, I'm like, no, that's not, he's going to help people one day. He kind of became like my little poster boy for students who are nervous. And so I decided to create this section at the end of every major chapter called What Could Go Wrong? And all the questions in What Could Go Wrong are based on things that my students have actually said in class many times.
Really?
Yes, because I knew that there would be stumbling blocks along the way, and I didn't want people to get discouraged because whatever they were doing didn't look like the pictures. So it's like, here are the things that are probably going to happen to you. Let's have Anxious Frog help you and hold your hand. But I was very lucky. Like, it's funny because when I looked at your book, I got a little bit jealous because at the end you have like art directors. There's like 5 different people with like art in their title who like helped make your book. But I had none. There was no art department for my book. And my book was one of the first that my publisher had ever made like this. And so I was the art director. And so part of the reason my book is so bonkers, luckily I had a very lovely editor who was
stunning.
A fan of bonkers.
Stunning.
Thank you. But nobody said no to me. So I would just go, can I just have this like frowning frog introduce the chapter? And can you have this thought bubble? And can you make it like this? And then the designer just went, yep.
What's to say no?
I don't know. Like, yeah, but there's even like funny captions that I put in like the still lifes of mending tools. And I thought they were going to get changed later and they didn't. Nobody got mad and changed them. And I was like, yes. Part of me was very frustrated. Like it was like, we've talked about this offline, but I had a much more challenging journey to getting published and getting a book deal than you. But I also feel very fortunate that nobody told me no. And I just got to be crazy. And they're like, oh, let's put it in the book. And so.
No, but if it was up to me, I wouldn't have made a book because it wouldn't have existed without people holding my hand along every step because I don't have a clue about books. And secondly, if I had had complete control creatively, it would have looked insane.
See, isn't it?
No, it wouldn't have looked insane. It would have looked like a child had done it.
Which could be a good thing. But it's funny because even though you don't have that background in making books, like you're really, really good at research and you ask really good questions on your podcast. You have these things like deep down inside you that maybe have not manifested in that way.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily recognize those skills as being like your core skills, but you had it in you, I reckon.
Oh, well, thank you.
So an interesting thing happened. I started to get these weird emails and phone calls from different people at my publisher, and I didn't understand what they meant. And then I started to figure out that it sounded like my book was going to sell out. And I thought, wait, what? Are you trying to tell me that my book's going to sell out? And then I was like, wait, I want more pages next time. Like, this is a lot of book talk that people probably don't expect, but it's not always a given that books are going to be reprinted because sometimes, the initial print run is usually the most successful. And then, publishers still have to decide every time whether something goes again. And so I had a long chat with them and I said, one day I would love to talk to you about like an expanded version because I have stuff that didn't make it in the first time. But I really was thinking like one day. And then after a few conversations, they said, yep, go for it. So when we had our extra long lockdown in Melbourne, it was like, we had more than 250 days of lockdown here. We hold the world record for most days in lockdown. But during the longest stretch, I spent that making the extra pages. And so I feel like the first edition of the book, yes, to some extent, I feel like it's my baby, but I feel like the second edition, which the same content is in the UK version that you've got. I feel like that is my baby. And then that's it. That's all I got. I got no more after that. I used to love looking at my mom's 1970s craft books.
Yeah.
They were my favorite thing. And I never made any of those projects, but they still, like, I remember there was like etched glass and there was like a polyester dressing gown that had a lily pad applique on it. And, and I remember their hair and I remember like the terrible like backdrops and stuff. And the whole thing just fascinated me. So I've always loved always loved them, but definitely love some more than others. But I guess that's my kind of thing is like, there's room for everyone. And I just make what I like. I make it for me. Yeah. And yes, I'm making it for other people, but
you can't make it for everyone. So you may as well make it for you.
Right. So I make myself the main customer and go, what do I think is missing? What book do I wish existed? Yeah. How do I want to do it?
Yeah.
Let's put weird frogs
and
cats in there.
And why not? Yeah. So, okay, right. Let's get into practicalities. So for someone to be able to tackle most garment mending challenges, what pieces of equipment are they definitely going to need in their possession?
Oh, I would love to give you a short and snappy answer for that. Depends on the person. It depends on their wardrobe. So like even my husband and I, it would be totally different things that we're talking about. So it depends on the clothes that you wear most often and wear out. But
Okay.
I'll tell you the things that I get asked about most often. Number one is crotch blowouts in jeans, especially. All the time. And that's why, even though like my book is predominantly visible mending, I insisted on there being a chapter on machine darning, which is a way to do let's not say invisible mending, but a blended mend.
Yes.
And it's very strong and durable in the seat of your jeans, but it does require a sewing machine, and it also requires sewing machine confidence. So if you are someone listening to this podcast and you have a sewing machine and you've never tried mending and you wear out your ready to wear jeans, it's a really good thing to look into because you have the skills to do it already. You just probably didn't know that you had it. If you are someone who wears a lot of knitwear, like most of the students that I have wear thin machine knits. So the stuff from like Uniqlo comes into my classes a lot. It's not the thick, chunky knitwear that I see people having more often in Europe, where it's like proper cold winter. Like we get cold winters, but we don't get the.
We wear a lot of that other kind of knit as well. We just have to sometimes layer it.
Yes, but that's the stuff that is more likely to develop holes. Moths find it delicious. It's very hard to do a lot of the old school mending techniques on the super thin knitwear because you can't, like, unless you have laser precision eyesight. It's really hard to see. So that's when you have to get a little bit more creative and go, okay, if I'm not going to do it invisibly, what are my options? And so if you embrace the creative mending, you've got a lot of options. For me, the number one thing that anyone can learn is darning. And for me, darning is magical. I thought I knew what darning was, and I did not. I was like, yeah, I know what that is. And then no, I didn't actually know. And then when I saw it for the first time on the internet and someone darned in fluorescent orange on like a sky blue blanket, that was the light bulb moment for me when I went,
really?
Oh, now I'm listening. Now I'm paying attention because that is achievable. I can do that. And that looks like that's something fun that I can actually try.
Do you know what I don't think I could do is that kind of darning that you see some people do where they've almost made it look like tartan.
Yes.
That's just next level. That's not even next level. That's 7 levels away.
It's actually not as hard as you think. That is actually not that hard, but it just takes a bloody long time. And you've got to get it precise and get it all lined up and then to weave in all the ends. So there's also can we talk about Instagram?
Of course we can.
I have a lot to say about Instagram.
I have a lot to say about Instagram as well.
Right, bring it. There are a lot of things on Instagram that look fun and beautiful, but you don't necessarily see how much work goes into them. And some people can be misleading about it, or they just omit the information. Right. So I've had a lot of students bring things in that they have attempted to mend after seeing them on Instagram or Pinterest. And they've just picked a thing that's like way too time consuming or challenging for a first mend. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm so sorry. No, this is not.
We need to go back a few steps.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So on the one hand, I'm glad that we've reached a new kind of bar, aesthetically speaking, that more people are getting interested because they're like, oh, that doesn't look all homespun. That looks beautiful. I can try that. But it also not necessarily giving them the tools to understand like when to apply certain things. So don't trust everything you see on Instagram, kids.
Yes.
Ask some questions. Do a little bit of research before you just go full into
because you're going to get disheartened, aren't you, and kind of give up and put it away and think like, this is not for me. Like, it could be for you. You just went in a bit too deep.
Okay, this says a lot about my personality, but I have this thing when I get orders in my shop and I can see that someone has ordered very different needles and yarn that don't normally go together, that is a red flag for me that this person is a beginner and they don't know what they're doing. And I always send them a really sweet email when I see the combinations. And I'm like, I couldn't help but noticing, by any chance are you a first-time mender? I think you might want these other needles instead, or you might want this other yarn instead. Like, what are you trying to mend? And then quite often they will admit that, yes, they had no idea what they were doing. And they will give me this whole story about what they're trying to mend. And then we go through this process of getting them stuff that's actually going to help.
Oh.
And it takes more time for me, but I feel like my job is to make people enjoy it and keep mending. That's what I want. I want people to actually feel like they can keep trying it and not get discouraged. That is the last thing that I
Yes.
want. I don't want people to go,
You need to give them an early win.
Yeah.
So go back to your book for a minute. So something that you've mentioned in your book a few times in slightly different ways is about the importance of spreading the word about mending, about starting conversations about mending and so on. So obviously, like, my whole deal with making this podcast is about having conversations that will hopefully invoke inspiration and kind of ultimately change. But I'd love to hear more about your perspective on this idea of the importance of spreading the word about it. And why do you think it's important, and how do you see, or you don't see, it playing out?
I think one of the things that I've noticed is that when people ask me what I do, and then I tell them, they give me really polite nods, and they're like, yeah, that's nice. Because let's face it, visible mending sounds like a terrible idea. It sounds terrible. And it's so weird having to talk on a podcast or a radio interview or something because you can't actually see it. So what I would just say, if you were listening to this right now and you have not seen any of the new forms of mending that are out there, please go have a look at some images first so you know what we're talking about, because it'll make the experience of listening to this very different. And also be aware that the last time I checked, the hashtag visible mending on Instagram it's beyond 10,000 posts now. So you're going to get a variety, and the spectrum is like so huge. Like, there's some people who are doing it professionally and it looks like art. There are some people who are doing it for the very first time and it's not as neat, and they're just having to go and they're having fun with it. You will get so many different aesthetics and styles and skill levels. So there really is something for everyone now. But I think part of the spreading the word about mending is that once you realize that, once you've seen all the different forms and you realize what's possible and that you can mend your own clothes, it's sort of like now you need to pass that on to other people so that they can see that too. Because most people have an idea in their head that mending is either unachievable or it's going to look horrible if they try. Or
it's going to look like Holly Hobby's dress.
Yes, exactly. So for me, it's, yes, part of it is environmental activism, but part of it is also just spreading the idea of possibility and going, this is a thing you can do. And not only that, but it's cool and it's fun and there are different options. So if you choose to do a creative mend, there are more opportunities to spark those conversations. Or if you choose to mend in public. I mean, I wrote the book in the before times. So there aren't as many opportunities to do that. But if you have social media, you still have opportunities to share what you're doing. You might end up inspiring people who follow you on Instagram, for example, to go, oh, I didn't know that you were a mender. I didn't know what you were doing. So it's all the different opportunities that you have, whether it's wearing a mended garment out in public or sharing a mend on social media, or if I see someone who has like a button missing from their shirt or like a hole in their pants that doesn't look like one that they really wanted to be there, I will occasionally ask a question and say, would you like me to show you how to fix that? There's that as well, because they might not realize that it's possible. Even if you don't do it yourself, you might recommend and go, hey, there's this awesome alterations place down the road. Do you want me to give you information about that?
Yeah. Or I saw a YouTube video. Let me find the link for you.
Yes, because we are disposing of clothes at a rapid increasing rate. But one of the number one reasons that people throw out clothes is not just because of, fast fashion. It's also because there's a flaw or a damage in the garment and they don't know how to fix it. And they don't even think it's possible. I've had so many students say to me, I had this amazing sweater or dress or shirt or whatever that I threw out because I thought it couldn't be mended. And I'm so sad. I wish I would have kept it.
No.
Yeah, but I just didn't know. And so it's about showing people, yes, it is possible. You can do it. It's fun. There's lots of us doing it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can experiment. It's a thing.
Yeah. So thinking about the role of kind of social media and mending, so do you think that, for example, Instagram as a platform sufficiently promotes mending, or do you think that perhaps that kind of format and forum will always kind of favor that kind of rabid making of like brand new things, that's in a similar vein to kind of the rabid consumption of fast fashion?
Instagram promotes Instagram.
Ooh.
Instagram.
Such a good point.
Well, it's true. Instagram doesn't act on its own. Does not.
Yeah, it's a business ultimately. Yeah.
So the things that you see in your feed, the ads that you see, are things that people have paid to promote. And I think they're changing the options I read that there's a change coming, but you have to like manually select that you want to see the old way of chronological posts. Whatever, yeah.
Oh,
So that's coming back as an option. But still, for the most
oh
part,
yeah, the
whatever
algorithms.
you like on Instagram, you will end up seeing more of that. And I don't know about you, Zoe, but I follow a lot of people on Instagram, and there is no mathematical way possible that I could even see all of their posts in any one session. It's just not possible. So they know that, and that's why they try to show you more of what you like. So if you are following sewing accounts, for example, that you give a lot of likes to, then you're just going to end up seeing more of those same accounts, which is a good thing. But sometimes it's easy to forget other things that you like or have been missing out until you go, hang on, I
Yes.
haven't heard from that person in a while. I wonder what
Yes.
happened.
Yeah, you have to remember and go and find them.
Right. So if you're not already liking mending predominant accounts, then you're probably not going to see as much of that in your feed. So one of the really interesting ways that you can kind of skew that, like when we do challenges, for example, so that's a good way for people who follow you to go, oh, I didn't know about that challenge, or I didn't know. People that I know who mostly post about things that they make new. And then occasionally they'll throw in men's. But I've noticed that a lot of people just do that in their stories. And so I will reply
I'm guilty of that.
Yes. And then I reply to people's stories and say, I would love this if you put it in as a post, because I think more people would appreciate seeing this. So it's an interesting thing. It's like, I'm happy to show my mending, but I'm only happy enough to show it in my stories, which means I don't think it's as attractive as the other things that I usually post.
True.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah, I guess I think that some of my men's are just like, does anyone need to see that I've hemmed my son's joggers to make them into shorts? I don't know.
I think so. Because one of the other things I get asked about the most is alterations, and I don't have any alterations in my book. And I'm constantly getting asked for resources. Like, where can I find out how to do this? Like, is it possible? And until people see that something is possible, they don't know. They can't imagine. It's very hard for people to imagine that what you and I can do, we can easily imagine it. They cannot. So until we actually show examples, you don't know. So when I was running the pop-up repair workshops back in 2013, I repaired a hole in someone's jeans in the rear. And then the following week, after I posted about it on social media, we got like 12 or 13 pairs of jeans with the same problem. And
really?
And everyone just went, oh, I have that problem too. And my most famous mend, which I call Large Marge, is a black and white striped long sleeve shirt. And the reason I got that one is because I had repaired my own black and white striped long sleeve shirt.
Oh, they were literally like, oh, I have one of those.
That's exactly what happened. And she said, oh, I have one of those too. Can you repair this? And I went, well, okay, well, I'll have a look. And so, yes, every example that you can post is totally worth doing so that people know it's actually a thing. And it's like why I put boxer shorts and pajama bottoms and whatever. I'm just trying to go, yes, you can technically mend just about anything. It is possible.
Okay. I pledge to post more men's in my feed.
Is that your pledge for May?
That's my pledge. It's my pledge for life, actually, Erin. It's what I'm going to do from now on.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah. You got me thinking about everybody can do more. Everybody can do something. We don't necessarily know what that is. So even you and I, who are big into sustainability, and we'll talk about that till the cows come home, even we can do something different that like we haven't thought of.
Yes.
Like one thing I thought of was like, I actually didn't realize for the longest time, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, I thought Me Made May was just about posting new clothes. And I know, I've seen in the FAQs that like, that's not what it's about, but I didn't know. But it's hard because nobody owns hashtags. And so
this is the thing. When you go on hashtag, sometimes it's hard to find the source, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
I completely agree.
With challenges like yours, it's more of like an idea and you have to set your own challenge.
Yes, which is its strength and its weakness. It's its strength because it is very inclusive and it can benefit everybody, no matter how long they've been making clothes, be they literally have one item or be they have an top to toe me made every single day already. Like there's a way that you can set your challenge to benefit you, to improve your relationship with your stuff. But equally, because it's not got this super snappy kind of elevator pitch, it makes it, I've, over the years, I've really struggled to explain what it is. And it's very easy when it has ended up on Instagram as its main forum of the community side of it really now, isn't it? But yeah, it looks like people parading and showing off their things. And I really, really hate it so much when I see things like in advance, say like in April, I need to make a few more tops this week because it's Me Made May coming up. I'm like, no!
Right.
just want to cry because that's not what it's about. But it's so hard to get that across, you know, in that forum of Instagram, you know.
So what if you changed it? What if you did like Remade May? And there are like prizes. Or you did like two going at the same time. You're like, there's Me Made May and there's also Remade May.
There's lots of things I think about that. One, I'm only one person, and it is already incredibly time consuming. Second, some people do include like altered things or mended things. Like I like that can be part of it if that's what you want, you know.
Yes.
And I think then if we did do like a Remade May, then does the other one just become literally this kind of rabid, just show off of new stuff, you know, that's almost like the kind of sewing equivalent of going to H&M every weekend, you know? I worry that what will this become if we've got this as well? I want to kind of, come on, guys, let's all just think about what we're wearing a bit more.
Yeah, it's so hard. And yeah, if people run away with it too, they're like, oh, it's Me Made May. Like they'll start doing it even if you like hid.
Yeah.
I guess the challenge for the listeners is how can you interpret those challenges? Like you don't have to do them. Nobody has to do a challenge. And I don't want anyone to feel bad about doing a challenge. I don't even have time to host one. So I'm not going to host one. I just play along when it's convenient and fun for me. But yeah, I think the thing is, one thing that I've learned to get things done, breaking projects down into small chunks is really helpful for me in bite-sized pieces. And also momentum. So once I start something, it's much easier for me to get things done, but it's the starting that's always the hard part. So if a challenge helps you with that, then that is great. And if you are looking to become more sustainable, or you're like, oh, I don't really want to make anything new. If you're having those same thoughts that I was having for a while, like I don't really want to make new things because I don't really have anything that I need, or then you go, okay, well, what can you do? Can you alter stuff? Can you mend stuff? Can you?
Yeah.
Can you?
But Me Made May could help you with that.
Absolutely. It might even be something like using a pattern that you've already used and cut up, so you're not printing another pattern and just making it, making something out of a sheet, but using a pattern you love, or turning a pattern that you have for a shirt and hacking it so it becomes a dress. Yes. So getting more wear even out of those.
Which brings me to my next point that I wanted to discuss with you, in fact. So I've been thinking a lot about generally how like the online sewing community kind of views making and how it defines creativity. Mean more than, I've got a pattern, I've got a piece of fabric, I have made a garment. That's like one end. And then I guess the other end you could argue is mending, like something that is already in existence and you're just expanding its existing life, extending its existing life. But there's so many things and activities within that as well, isn't there, in that spectrum, like including like upcycling, including, altering or refitting and something. So how can we help the sewing community kind of expand that definition of creativity? Because I think there's so many activities that could be enjoyed that doesn't have to be starting with a brand new piece of fabric,
Yes.
Oh, really? You're going to let me say all that and then you're going to go, yeah.
Well,
thanks.
Again, it comes back to that thing of people don't know what's possible until they see it. And
yes.
And Instagram can be beautiful for fostering a sense of community and getting people motivated to do stuff. But it can also be, I guess, very same, like what you're saying. Like I made a garment. This is how I made it. This is the fabric that I bought. I'm going to tag the shop where I bought the fabric or whatever. Yeah, which is great. But do you know the ones that I love the most? Before I think I'm going to make something, I will search the hashtag on Instagram. And my favorites are always the ones where people made significant modifications. Oh. So they're like, I added 2 inches. I decided to add a button placket. I didn't do the thing they said to do with the neckline because I thought the instructions were terrible or whatever. Those are the ones that I end up saving in my Pinterest and going, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm a tall person too. I'm going to do what that tall person did, Yeah. And so I think if you are someone who has made modifications to patterns, you need to be sharing that. If you are someone who has altered things, if you've added a ruffle to things, if you've done it, if exactly what we were talking about, if you've just shortened your son's pants, instead of hiding it in your stories, make it as a post, because until other people see it, it's not going to normalize it. It's not going to bring it into the mainstream. And so we're just, I like that there is
like some hashtags now that then say, for example, Hudson Pants hack or Ashton hack. Yes. I think that's really good that we've got that now as a formula for finding these.
I also love that some pattern designers are now selling instructions for the hacks. Like, so I just saw, for example, I'm not going to name it because I'm not sure if I'm going to get the details right, but there was a particular dress that was quite famous on Instagram. And then the pattern designer had created these really beautiful statement sleeves to go with this sleeveless dress. And now you can actually buy the instructions for the statement sleeves to do it. And it's a completely different look. And it's fantastic.
And you get more value from your initial purchase as well.
Absolutely. And if you know that you already love that pattern and it suits you, you're like, oh, well, I can just keep making that. You know? So
especially if you've made modifications to the fit to make it fit your body, that's a win.
Yes. But I think not everyone has the imagination or the creative capacity to do that. And until they actually see it's possible, they're not going to try it themselves. And I wasn't sewing clothes for over a decade because at some point I realized I'm not the standard size and I'm going to have to make modifications to the pattern. So I'm very different sizes between top and bottom. And also my bust is lower and I'm a tall person. So I've got a long torso and all these things. And the mental exhaustion that came with the idea of starting a project, and it just seems like harder than it actually is. So that actually discouraged me from sewing at all. So I think people are reluctant to try to do hacks because they're like, that's just more than I can handle mentally, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas if you see other people doing it and it looks fun, or like, for example, I gained a lot of weight during lockdowns, but also not just because of lockdown, like getting older and a bunch of different reasons. But I've had to add some lockdown panels to some of my garments to make them suit. And someone coined that term in my Facebook group and I thought, oh, that's funny. I'm going to use that. And so I just think about it and go, but if people don't see other people doing that, they don't realize that that's a thing. So sewists, you have a superpower. You're probably doing all these things and you don't even realize you're altering and mending. It's like actually that little stuff is really important to share too, because menders are very good at sharing it with other menders. But it can kind of be an echo chamber.
Do you feel there is like a kind of subset? There is like a mending community as such?
To some extent, yes. And then, like I said, there's all those closet menders. But also, like, Instagram is very easy to pigeonhole your own account. So if you see what gets likes and shares, then you're going to keep posting that same kind of content. So you might want to post about your cat or the flowers that you saw or this cool house. But if people only give you likes on your posts that are about your awesome makes in front of your really cute wall in your house with the cute bookshelf, then that's what you're going to keep posting. And so all of this stuff stays hidden and it stays in your stories. So I guess maybe think about, expanding beyond that so people can see that mending is possible. I think alterations in particular, they're just magical to a lot of people. And there aren't a lot of books on the topic. Yes. I was so glad to see that you had them in your book and you have the really good illustrations, because that's stuff that's not covered in mine and I kind of wish it was.
Yeah, but I think I'm going to do an episode for the podcast on simple approaches to alterations soon as well.
Yes.
I do think it's something that isn't covered very much.
No, and it's hard to find. Like, there are some resources and I do have some books, but there's nothing where I'm like, oh yeah, this covers everything that people want to know. So the more examples of that we can get out into the world, the better.
Yeah. I also really appreciated in your book the section that you included towards the back where you showcase the work of other menders and kind of different things that they can teach us, because it really highlights that there are infinite ways to kind of approach the same repair job. So can you name a few of the menders that inspire you and tell us what it is about their approach that you enjoy?
There's so many menders whose work I love.
Just give me a few.
The most exciting ones right now, there seems to be a lot of German-speaking menders who are the ones that I always end up liking their stuff and go, wow, like every time I see it. So there's Zeki from Konfekt, so Konfekt. She just does the most amazing work. She is a wizard. And I tell her that every time she mends something. Amazing.
Still a wizard.
Yes. And there's Uli, who goes by Schneckstein on Instagram, and she's doing beautiful work. It's really just amazing. And there's Anne from The Whole Story. So she's in Switzerland, but I think the German speaking part of Switzerland. Right. She just does phenomenal things as well. And there's also Ekaterina Hack, and she does little teeny tiny like embroideries on holes, and she's doing really fun things with reels. I think she's Russian, but she lives in Germany. I think on my Instagram, I've got a story highlight called Mendy Friends.
This has been an amazing conversation. I think we need to wrap up now because it must be getting really late. Thank you so much for sharing your time. It's been a really, really fun.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a treat.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!